Hey, all you Gretas and Shutezcats out there. Welcome to Chapter 4, Section 2 Notes. What role do species play in ecosystems? Once again, a lot of this should be familiar from freshman year biology class, but we're going to go over it just in case. So, niche. This is the role the species plays in an ecosystem and everything that affects its survival and reproduction. So your habitat is where you live, which is that next word, but your niche is how you live. So it's what you eat, what eats you, any reproductive whatever's, everything about that species is its niche. Species itself, you can be more either a generalist with a broad niche or a specialist with a narrow niche. And I'm going to go into better definitions of that, I think, on the next slide or two. But understand niche is the whole everything that an organism is going to do and experience in its life. So we have generalist and specialist species. The generalist species have very broad niches. So that means they can eat lots of food, they can live in lots of places. There's more competition because of that, but they're less prone to extinction because they can make do with what they find and where they can live. Specialist species have a much narrower niche. So they have a specialized diet, or maybe they only live in a couple types of habitats, much less competition, but much more prone to extinction just because of that specialized thing. So a generalized species would be something like a rat or a raccoon. You can find them lots of places and they will eat anything. If one area goes bad, they'll just move on. Specialist species would be like a koala or a panda. So they are only eating eucalyptus or bamboo, or say a salamander that only lives in lakes. So if that lake dries up, that salamander's out of luck. If something happens to bamboo, we have no more pandas. So specialist species, much less competition, but then if that one thing that they really need goes away, so do they. So here we have our panda, much more narrow niche, and then our generalist species with a broader niche. Now these niches can overlap. So I want you guys to think, what would happen in this area where they overlap? So just think about that for a second. So usually what would happen is this would kind of go down straight. So when the niches overlap, to avoid competition, the raccoon would stay on this side and the panda would stay on this side. And that way they still get what they need, but then they're not having to compete with each other. Because believe it or not, nature goes out of their way to not compete with each other. I think more humans need to do that. So specialization reduces competition. And here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 different birds that you can all find, if I can count quickly, 12 different birds you can all find by the ocean, on the shore. But they each have their own niche. They're either on the land or slightly in the water, or they eat all these different things. So all of these different birds can hang out at the same place and not have to compete with each other. So the example I give in class is I'm a vegan, which makes me a really awesome wedding date because I will eat all your vegetables and you get the meat off of my plate. Because my diet is specialized, so I don't have to compete with too many people. Even with the quarantine, I could always find tofu in the stores when I look for it. Because even during quarantine, people don't usually buy too much tofu. So we also have what are called native and non-native species. A native species naturally originated in a specific ecosystem and it's suited to its conditions there. Non-native either immigrate and they come in, or they are introduced either deliberately or accidentally into an ecosystem by humans. Now, non-native species don't have to be invasive, but they can become invasive. So what this means is, and we'll talk about this and we'll do a project a little bit later, they will outcompete and or displace the native species. They spread very quickly if they find a niche that works for them, and they often lack predators because they're not native to that area. So if you're native to an area, you usually have predators built in because that's how nature works. But if you move to an area that you're not supposed to be in, you often don't have that natural predator or a disease that would help keep the population in check. So we will go more into that a little bit later, but invasive species, bad. Keystone species, we're going to do some videos and reflection on this week. Keystone species play very critical roles in their ecosystems. So if you think of an archway, that top stone is the keystone, because if you pull that one stone out, the entire thing falls apart. So keystone species are kind of like that. If they go away, everything else is going to fall apart. Keystone species affect both the type and abundance of other species in their ecosystem, even if it doesn't seem like they will. And we're going to give you multiple examples of this week. Majorly different ecosystem if they disappeared. So sometimes they often regulate the populations of other species, mountain lions, wolves, and sea otters. And they can cause population crashes and extinction of dependent species if they are drawn to extinction themselves. So we will go and give you some more examples of this week in videos and in class. So here are two examples. One of them is the American alligator as a keystone species. So they live down in southeastern United States. The gator holes, which is kind of like their nesting area, provide fresh water, habitat for aquatic life, and nesting and feeding sites for other species. The digging activity will help maintain the balance of vegetation. They help control various predatory fish populations. They were almost hunted to extinction. They became an endangered species until 1987. They are now threatened by invasive Burmese pythons that will eat the babies. So that is bad. We actually need the alligators down in Florida. Sharks are another one. They are going to keep their ecosystem functioning and help maintain the healthy distribution of other marine species. 1 million sharks are killed annually, both in exaggerated media reports on shark attacks, and then a lot of them are killed also for shark fin soup, which is fairly popular in China. As many as 73 million sharks are killed every year to eat. And they usually don't kill the shark, they just chop off the fins and then throw the shark back into the water. But sharks live by moving. They only breathe as the water goes over their gills. So if they can't move because they don't have fins, they're slowly suffocating on the bottom of the ocean. So it's an awful, awful way to die. And the only one who needs a shark fin is the shark. 25% or more of the world's open ocean shark species are threatened, and they're very vulnerable due to they don't grow very quickly and they have very low reproductive rates. They don't make babies very often. So we need to save the sharks. Indicator species. An indicator species indicates the health of an ecosystem. So it's very, very sensitive to changes in that ecosystem. If you have a lot of an indicator species, it's going to show that it's a healthy ecosystem, and if you don't, it will show it's an unhealthy ecosystem. Amphibians are great examples of this. Frogs live both on land and water, so if anything is wrong with either one of those things, they tend to go away from that area. So if you see an area with lots of frogs, it's a healthy ecosystem. If you see an area that should have frogs but doesn't, not a healthy ecosystem. And this is going to be referred to in the case study that we will talk about this chapter. So you can think of natural environmental factors like viruses, funguses, parasites, and then you can also think of things like human-related factors, habitat loss, pollution, and climate change. So if you see the indicator species, good. If you do not, bad. And you're done, once again. Before I go, I just want to take this opportunity to let you guys know that you are good enough, you are smart enough, and people like you. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good God, do your homework.